The history of civilization is a history of class struggle, the eternal war between the oppressors and the oppressed. As Karl Marx exposed, the ruling class always writes history to glorify themselves. For the last century, alternative schools have tried to focus on the daily lives of everyday people. But let's be real, today, nation-states still push the same old narrative, the history of the elites, the history of the conquerors. But every now and then, an event explodes with such seismic force that it completely shatters the geopolitical landscape. Today, we are looking at one of those definitive moments. When power targets life itself, the act of living becomes the ultimate defiance. When the state brings death, sacrifice transforms into a massive weapon of mass resistance. Today, we are talking about a monk who did the unthinkable, a man whose revolutionary act broke the back of a fascist regime, a man who exposed the raw, bloody face of US imperialism to the entire world.
They have barbecued.
Saigon, 1963. A match strikes the burning asphalt. A man sits enveloped in raging flames. He doesn't scream. He doesn't maul. This is not a suicide. This is a revolutionary manifesto. A manifesto of body. This is a fiery slap in the face of the American empire and its puppet regime. Look closer, zoom into the frame. A 66-year-old monk, ribs visible through skin, yellow robes, orange sash, hands locked in the lotus position. This isn't a meditation, this is open war. The battlefield, a chaotic city intersection, Pan Din Pung Boulevard, Le Van Duet Street, the absolute heart of Saigon. Today, the heart beats with pure fire. His name is Thích Quảng Đức, born Lam Van Tuc in 1897. Under the iron heel of French colonialism, monastery at 7, monk at 20, he spent his life on meditation mats in isolated mountains until a corrupt US-backed dynasty turned his homeland into a living hell. But understand this, Thích Quảng Đức was not an isolated actor. He was the vanguard of a massive collective uprising known as the 1963 Buddhist crisis.
Namo Dafana, Namo Dafana, Namo Dafana.
This popular front was organized under the Unified Buddhist Church of Vietnam. The strategic brain was a radical monk named Thích Quảng, inspired by mass non-violent resistance.
Namo Dafana, Namo Dafana, Namo Dafana.
What have the Buddhist leaders done? Even that barbecuing was done not even with self-sufficient means, because they use imported gasoline.
This movement fought for more than religious freedom. They were defending Vietnam's national identity against the regime's fascist personalist revolution. After a brutal state massacre in Hue on May 8, 1963, the masses revolted. General strikes, food boycotts, and shut down cities Saigon, Hue, and Da Nang were in open rebellion. Thích Quảng Đức became the ultimate weapon of this mass defiance. No Dinh Diem, remember the name of this tyrant. He is one of the darkest villains in Vietnamese history, fanatically Catholic, ruthlessly feudal, and completely bought and paid for by Washington. In 1954, Western empires drew a line on a map and split Vietnam in half. Ho Chi Minh took the communist north, but the south, Washington handpicked their loyal puppet, Diem.
Namo Quan Shin Pu Sa. Namo Quan Shin Fa Hiam Hiam Fa.
The American imperial machine in Indochina operated exactly like it did in Latin America and Turkey. Especially after World War II, the empire infiltrated the deep state until the Vietnamese Communist forces organized the masses and seized power. Imperialism casually traded human lives for corporate and geopolitical hegemony. The CIA, the Pentagon, and the US Embassy were the real puppet masters. Diem was just the front man, a front man who ruled his own people with absolute terror. A completely reached referendum. Diem claims a mathematically impossible 98.2% of the vote. In Saigon alone, the regime manufactured 605,000 votes out of a city with only 450,000 registered voters. The fake elections, stolen ballots, and phantom voters we see across the capitalist world today. This puppet regime perfected them. History repeats itself because our world is still run by modern-day pharaohs. Tyranny.
Old and the very young. The Marines have burned this old couple's cottage because fire was coming from here.
Diem's 98.2% is the direct ancestor of today's corporate state illusions. The ruling party was the Khan Lao, their ideology, personalism. A philosophy stolen from French Catholics and warped into a tool for absolute dictatorship. The value of the person? Sure, but only for the M family. For the working class, you are just a number, just a statistic, just fuel for the machine of system.
Fa Hiam Hiam. Namo Dei Ji Dei Pei Da Yuan. Da Ji Da.
80% of Vietnam was Buddhist, yet a westernized Catholic minority ruled with an iron fist. The state armed loyal Catholic villages. They banned the Buddhist flag. On Wesak, the Buddha's birthday, Diem's forces opened fire on peaceful crowds in Hue. 9 innocent people slaughtered. The regime's propaganda machine immediately blamed communist terrorists. But the working class knew the truth. It was Diem's state-sponsored thugs who pulled the triggers. Then came the darkest night, August 21, 1963, past midnight, just a stone's throw from where Thích Quảng Đức made his sacrifice. The Sa Loi Pagoda stands tall. The ballot box is stripped of popular will and used as a mask to legitimize. This was the fortress of the 1963 resistance. This is where Thích Quảng and the popular leadership coordinated the strikes. This is where hundreds of striking monks and nuns gathered. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by the roar of military engines. Diem's brother, Nu, unleashes his fascist special forces, the military security service and the armed thugs of the Republican youth, masked, armed and cold-blooded. The command stormed the pagodas, crushed them all. They smash the gates, they drag monks from their prayers, they attack with clubs, boots and rifle butts. Inside Saloy alone, over 30 monks and nuns are brutally died. Blood splatters across the sacred walls, golden statues are pulled down, holy texts are stomped into the dirty by military boots. A coordinated structural blitz hits 15 pagodas across Saigon and Hue simultaneously. Over 1,400 monks and nuns are abducted by the state, swallowed by secret detention centers and military prisons. Thích Quảng escapes by a thread. Sanctuaries are left painted in revolutionary blood. The midnight raid exposed an absolute desperation of dying regime. Propaganda failed, threats failed. The state had to resort to naked military violence against its own culture core. But this desperation sealed their fate, because Thích Quảng Đức sacrifice was about to ignite a wildfire. The time for talk was over. Thích Quảng Đức walks out of the Pap Quang Monastery, 66 years old, a master of internal discipline. He steps off his meditation mat and marches straight to the front line. Texts are no longer enough. The body must become the message. The body must scream.